Good God, George Washington said, is this the army with which I am to defend America? What is the truth about that raggle-taggle winter army of 1776? The truth is that its frozen soldiers were camped out here in the icy corn stubble of Pennsylvania, having turned and run before the British, having been chased out of Long Island, out of New York, and down the length of New Jersey, and now waited, sullen and miserable, with their country at stake. For what? For their enlistments to run out on the 31st of December, that's what, so they could all go home. And that's the truth. There, in New Jersey, there, just across the Delaware River, there were the Hessians, sleeping warm in American beds at Trenton. The British and their Hessian allies had half the country, had better troops and better guns, had roofs over their heads, had every expectation of a quiet and quite merry Christmas. George Washington had a barefoot rabble in the snow on the verge of desertion. And one more thing. He had boats. They were big Durham boats, just like these, used before the war for hauling iron ore. Washington had bought and hired and stolen every Durham boat on the Delaware River and made sure they were all on his side of the river. Washington had just written his brother, "Unless we can raise a new army, I think the game is pretty near up." He was beginning to think of surrender, and that's the truth. He had one alternative in the 1 week before his army went home: to use the boats. There was ice, but it wasn't ice like this. It was the ordinary floe ice that clogs the Delaware every winter. There was Washington, but he didn't look like this. One of his soldiers remembered mostly his red nose turning scarlet in the wind. That night he was not, the soldier said, what ladies would call a pretty man. It was not the way we remember it from the picture that hung in our fourth-grade classrooms. It was much less heroic and much more miserable. And that's the truth. Cold storm clouds moved across the moon that Christmas night as Washington's 2,400 scarecrows were shuttled from their cornfields across the river toward the Jersey shore. Those boats carried a heavy burden. 21-year-old Private John Marshall was in one of them. 19-year-old Captain Alexander Hamilton was in another, and 18-year-old Lieutenant James Monroe. Boys who had it in them to lead a country someday, if there were a country left to lead. Washington's tattered army marched down this country road to Trenton, so many of them barefoot that they left a bloody trail behind them in the snow. And that's the truth. The Hessian commander was still sleeping off his Christmas hangover when the first cannonade of Continental grape shot came rattling down King Street. Hessian soldiers trying to regroup in St. Michael's churchyard scattered before an American bayonet charge. 20 British dragoons woke up in a panic at the Friends Meeting House and ran without firing a shot. 2 hours later at the Hessian barracks, 900 elite grenadiers held up their hands and surrendered under the guns of George Washington's hollow-eyed, ragged rabble. Washington sent the Hessians' drums and battle flags to the young Congress, where they remained during 5 dark years of war as a symbol of the Christmas night when a ragged rabble saved the country. "These are the times that try men's souls," Tom Paine had written that winter by the light of an army campfire, using a drumhead for a desk. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the thanks of man and woman. And that's the truth.